Before we begin, I want to take a moment to honor the cultures behind the stories we are about to explore. The tales shared here come from many peoples, lands, and traditions. I do not change these stories to fit modern expectations or to align with today's social standards. Instead, I present them as they were told, sometimes beautiful, sometimes harsh, sometimes challenging. We are not here to judge the past, but to understand it, to listen, to learn, and to honor the ancestors who carried these stories forward. We also share stories from various religious traditions. These are presented in their historical and spiritual context, with respect for their beliefs that they represent. Every culture deserves respect, context, and acknowledgement, and this space is dedicated to doing exactly that. Story 1: When Stone Became Sacred. The ancient Egyptians believed that the gods were far too magnificent to be contained by the human imagination alone. Yet they also believed the divine desired places where heaven could gently touch the earth. Along the fertile banks of the Nile, they raised temples unlike any the world had ever seen. Great avenues lined with ram-headed sphinx stretched toward towering gateways whose walls blazed with painted reliefs. Forests of colossal columns rose like papyrus marshes turned to stone, their carved capitals blossoming beneath shafts of golden sunlight that filtered through the sacred halls. Every measurement, every inscription, every block of sandstone was carefully placed so that the temple itself reflected the harmony of creation. At its heart stood the image of a god, whether it was Amun, enthroned in majesty, Ra, crowned with a solar disk, Isis, offering protection with outstretched wings, or Horus watching with the keen eyes of the falcon. These statues were never understood as ordinary sculptures. Through elaborate rituals known as the opening of the mouth, priests invited the divine life force to dwell within the sacred image, transforming carved stone into a living point of encounter between the visible and invisible worlds. Each dawn, the temple awakened as though greeting the rising sun itself. Priests entered the innermost sanctuary in silence, carrying purified water, fragrant oils, fine linen, and fresh offerings of bread, fruit, flowers, and incense. They washed the divine image, clothed it in newly woven garments, adorned it with precious jewelry, and presented food as honored guests would receive a beloved king. Outside, the bustling cities carried on with ordinary life, yet within those quiet chambers, the Egyptians believed heaven itself was being lovingly welcomed into the world once again. During great festivals, the sacred statues were lifted onto magnificent ceremonial barks and carried through the streets, as music echoed from trumpets and drums, while crowds gathered simply to glimpse the presence of their god passing among them. These processions reminded the people that the divine was not distant or indifferent. The gods still walked with Egypt, blessed the land, the Nile, and its people. To the ancient Egyptians, stone possessed remarkable permanence. Kingdoms might rise and fall, floods might reshape the riverbanks, rulers might pass into history, yet the carved temple endured across generations. In giving lasting form to their reverence, they sought not to imprison the gods within stone, but to create sacred places where humanity could continually remember the eternal order upon which all life depended. Every towering statue, therefore, proclaimed a quiet hope that the beauty, harmony, and presence of heaven might always find a home upon the earth. Story 2: The Throne of Zeus at Olympia. When travelers arrived at the sacred sanctuary of Olympia in ancient Greece, they entered a place unlike any other. Olive trees whispered in the warm breeze. Athletes trained upon the dusty fields where the Olympic Games honored the kings of the gods, and temples gleamed beneath the brilliant Mediterranean sun. Yet nothing prepared visitors for what waited inside the great temple of Zeus. Passing through towering marble columns and into the dimly lit sanctuary, their eyes slowly adjusted until an enormous figure emerged from the shadows. There, seated upon an immense throne, was Zeus himself. The statue rose nearly 40 feet into the air, so vast that ancient writers remarked if the god had stood upright, he would have lifted the roof from the temple. Created around the 5th century BCE by the celebrated sculptor Phidias, the masterpiece was fashioned from gleaming ivory and brilliant sheets of gold, in the luxurious chryselephantine style. His flesh shimmered with polished ivory. His robes glowed like liquid sunlight. Upon his head rested an olive wreath, while in one hand he held Nike, the winged goddess of victory, and in the other a magnificent scepter crowned by an eagle. Jewels sparkled across the throne, which was adorned with scenes from Greek mythology, precious ebony, ivory, and colored glass. Lamps flickered softly before the statue, their light dancing across the gold until Zeus seemed almost alive, watching every visitor who dared approach his presence. The Greeks did not believe that Zeus himself was trapped within the statue. Rather, the image became a meeting place where a mortal imagination could approach divine majesty. Standing before it, worshippers experienced not merely admiration for an artist's skill, but reverence for the king whose authorities extended across the heavens, the seas, and the earth below. Many ancient visitors confessed that no words could fully describe what they had seen. They spoke instead of feeling astonishingly small beneath the calm gaze of the god, as though for a brief moment they stood within Olympus itself. The Olympic Games held nearby became more than athletic contests. They were acts of sacred devotion that united rival city-states beneath the shared recognition that there existed something greater than politics, wealth, or war. Every 4 years, weapons were laid aside while athletes, poets, philosophers, and pilgrims gathered before the throne of Zeus, acknowledging that peace, however temporary, was itself an offering worthy of the gods. Though the statue would eventually disappear from history, remembered only through ancient descriptions and scattered coins bearing its likeness, its influence endured for centuries as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It stood as a testament to humanity's enduring desire not simply to carve stone or shape gold, but to give visible form to the invisible majesty that inspires awe, reverence, and unity. Through the hands of one remarkable sculptor, the Greeks sought to create a place where heaven might feel astonishingly close, and for countless visitors, they succeeded. Story 3. Angkor Wat, the Temple of the Cosmos. As dawn slowly rises over the forests of Cambodia, a breathtaking silhouette emerges from the morning mist. 5 soaring towers lift themselves toward the heavens like unopened lotus buds reaching for the first light of day, while their reflection shimmers upon the still waters of an immense surrounding moat. Long before visitors ever crossed its sandstone causeways, they sensed they were approaching something far greater than a city or a monument. They were entering a vision of the universe itself. Built during the 12th century under the reign of King Suryavarman, Angkor Wat was first dedicated to the Hindu god Vishnu, the great preserver of cosmic order. Every measurement, every gallery, every courtyard, and every carved stone was arranged to mirror the structure of creation. The vast moat surrounding the temple represented the cosmic ocean believed to encircle the world. The outer walls marked the edge of the known universe. Beyond them rose successive terraces leading ever upward until the 5 central towers stood as the sacred peaks of Mount Meru, the mythical mountain at the center of the cosmos where the gods themselves were believed to dwell. To walk through Angkor Wat was not simply to enter a building. It was to undertake a symbolic pilgrimage from the ordinary world toward the divine center of existence. The temple's sandstone walls stretched for nearly a kilometer, every surface alive with astonishing detail. Endless processions of celestial dancers known as apsaras smiled from the stone with graceful serenity. Kings marched beside warriors, gods battled demons during the legendary churning of the ocean of milk, where heaven and earth struggled together to restore balance and obtain the nectar of immortality. Every corridor unfolded like another chapter of sacred history, inviting pilgrims to contemplate humanity's place within a universe sustained by divine order. As the sun climbed higher, beams of golden light entered the temple at carefully planned angles, illuminating statues and sanctuaries that had rested in shadow moments before. Stone itself seemed to awaken beneath the changing light. For the Khmer people, this was never simply architecture. It was an earthly reflection of heaven, a place where rulers, priests, and ordinary pilgrims could move through a landscape, intentionally designed to mirror the harmony of creation itself. Over the centuries, Angkor Wat gradually became a Buddhist sanctuary while preserving much of its original Hindu symbolism, allowing two great spiritual traditions to leave their mark upon the same sacred place. Today, it remains the largest religious monument ever constructed by human hands. Its towers still rise above the Cambodian forest, reminding the world that humanity has always longed to shape stone into something greater than shelter. We build temples because we hope to remember what lies beyond ourselves. Angkor Wat stands as one of history's grandest expressions of that longing, where architecture became power and every carefully carved stone pointed toward the eternal order believed to sustain the heavens above. Story 4. The Silent Faces of the Ancestors. Far out in the southeastern Pacific Ocean, thousands of miles from the nearest continent, rises one of the world's most isolated inhabited islands. The people of Rapa Nui settled this volcanic land by navigating the open ocean with extraordinary skill, carrying with them stories, traditions, and a profound reverence for their ancestors. Upon this remote island, they accomplished something that still fills visitors with wonder. From the volcanic slopes, they carved hundreds of immense stone figures known as moai. Some stood only a few feet tall, while others rose over 30 feet into the air and weighed many dozens of tons. Yet despite their immense size, nearly everyone gazed quietly inland, rather than toward the sea, watching over the villages where their descendants lived. Their long faces, strong brows, and solemn expressions gave the impression that they had been standing there since the beginning of time itself. To outsiders, the statues appeared mysterious, but to the people who raised them, they were never simply monuments of stone. The moai represented revered ancestors whose spiritual presence, known as mana, continued to protect, guide, and strengthen the living community. Once a statue was carefully carved from the volcanic rock of Rano Raraku, entire communities worked together to transport it across the island through remarkable feats of engineering and cooperation. At its prepared ceremonial platform called Inahu, the moai was raised upright to overlook the people it would forever watch. In many cases, brilliant white coral and obsidian were placed into the eye sockets during sacred ceremonies. Only then was the ancestor believed to fully awaken, extending its spiritual care across the land. The statues did not ask to be worshipped as gods. Instead, they reminded every generation that those who came before remained part of the life of the community. The living honored the dead, and the dead continued to bless the living. Through these towering figures, memory itself became visible. Children grew beneath their silent gaze. Ceremonies unfolded in their shadow. Generations passed, while the stone faces remained steadfast against wind, rain, and crashing waves. To the Rapa Nui, permanence was not found in wealth or conquest, but in faithfully remembering those whose lives had made the present possible. Today, the moai continue to stand beneath the vast Pacific sky, their weathered faces softened by centuries of salt air and sunlight. Though much about their construction still amazes archaeologists, their deeper purpose remains beautifully clear. Humanity has always sought ways to preserve what it holds most sacred. Sometimes that longing takes the form of temples reaching toward heaven. Sometimes it becomes statues filled with divine presence. And sometimes it stands quietly upon a lonely island, where silent faces carved from ancient stone remind every traveler that remembrance itself can become an act of reverence. Daily Thread for July 26th. Throughout this week, we have watched the world change. The divine withdrew from open sight. Humanity experienced correction. The flood washed creation clean. New covenants restored hope. Today, we discover what people across the world did next. They built, they carved, they remembered. Along the banks of the Nile, the ancient Egyptians raised magnificent temples where sacred statues were lovingly cared for each day, believing they had created places where heaven and earth might gently meet. In Greece, pilgrims entered the temple of Zeus at Olympia and stood speechless before the towering golden throne of the king of the gods, feeling for a fleeting moment as though they had stepped into Olympus itself. Deep within the jungles of Cambodia, the Khmer people constructed Angkor Wat, shaping an entire city as a reflection of the cosmos, where every causeway, courtyard, and soaring tower invited pilgrims to journey symbolically from the human world toward the divine center of creation. Far across the Pacific, the people of Rapa Nui carved their great moai, not as objects of worship, but as enduring reminders that the wisdom, presence, and blessings of the ancestors continue to guide those who remember them. Though separated by oceans and thousands of years, these remarkable civilizations reveal a shared longing that belongs to all humanity. We long to give shape to what cannot be seen. We build cathedrals, temples, shrines, monuments, memorials, and sacred spaces because our hearts instinctively reach for something greater than ourselves. Stone becomes prayer, architecture becomes memory, beauty becomes devotion. Yet the oldest traditions also whisper an important truth. The sacred does not live within stone because stone itself possesses power. Rather, these places become holy because they gather the reverence, gratitude, hope, and remembrance of the people who enter them. They point beyond themselves toward the eternal realities they were built to honor. As tonight's fire settles into glowing embers, consider this. What if I built my own life around? What receives my greatest attention, my deepest loyalty, my quietest moments of wonder? Every human heart raises monuments of one kind or another. The ancient storytellers gently remind us that what we choose to honor eventually shapes the person we become. May what we build, whether in stone or in unseen architecture of our daily lives, always point us towards wisdom, beauty, and the sacred.